All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome to the artist panel discussion. We are so excited to be hosting and be your facilitators today. And this is Fear the Festival's very first artist mixer panel discussion. And this is the BIPOC Horror Festival that explores the dimensions of fear. So, without further ado, we would like to welcome our facilitators and welcome our awesome guest.
So before we introduce our guests, my name is Isabella Derillo. I'm the co-festival director, and this is my lovely co-festival director, Eunice Katama.
Hey.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, who would like to go first and introducing themselves to the public, to the voices?
I think that's signaling to me. Hello. My name is Cindy Ansah, and I am a dance artist and emerging choreographer based in Calgary, Alberta. I'm currently a student at the University of Calgary, and yeah, dance is my main avenue into the performing arts and arts in general. I'm also a writer. I'm currently an English minor, hoping to go into an English double major. But yeah, that's all to say that I really love multidisciplinary collaboration in my work, pulling from many facets of artistic exploration is really what calls to me, is really what leads me to beautiful and enriching opportunities just like this. And I really appreciate, my performing arts background, which is based in music and dance and theater. And how it has led me to dance today and exploring my body and my different facets of my body, whether it's like racially or body image wise. Currently I'm really blessed to be dancing with Ways of Africa Music and Dance Theatre Inc. in Calgary, Alberta, and that experience so far has been so beautiful to connect with other very empowering Black women and Black people in the company, and just really digging into my culture a little bit more. I feel kind of estranged from my culture. I was born in Toronto, and I don't speak my mother tongue, so it's really been a process ongoingly about what does my heritage mean to me, and how has that contributed to who I am today and my art. That was really long, but that's all to say that yeah, there are definitely multiple facets that I dig into my artistic practice. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us, Cindy. It's amazing to have you.
Pleasure.
Hi, everyone. My name is Makram Ayache. I use he and him pronouns. Who am I? I'm a playwright, a performer. I usually write plays and then I perform within them. I'm also developing and practicing in directing. That's kind of next on my horizon, while keeping all the other things alive. I'm also an educator, sometimes in anti-oppressive spaces, working with like a range of sectors, from post-secondary institutions to the health sector to private organizations, corporations, arts organizations. I'm also a theater educator, typically working with youth, teaching playwriting or performing or devising. What else? What else? Oh, I kind of exist between Edmonton and Toronto. That's where I've been in Toronto. I've been planted in Toronto, but I've been producing in Edmonton for the past 3 years. And so I grew up in Alberta. I grew up in a small town in rural Alberta, like south of Calgary. Yeah, really tiny. And I was born in Lebanon, and so a lot of my work is impacted by all of those experiences, and I come into it recognizing that as a gay Arab, as a queer Arab, there's a certain sensibility and perspective that I bring into my work, and I never try to represent a totality of something. I do not speak for all gay Arabs, but rather I bring in one slice of that experience. Yeah. I'll leave it at that. We'll get to know each other more in the panel.
Amazing. Thank you so much for joining us. We're
Thank you so much
so
for everyone. Yeah.
excited.
Yeah, actually, Isabella, I think, you know what? I really like this idea, the theme of talking about your identity, because I think a lot of people, when they were applying to our festival, and we said it's a BIPOC festival, a lot of them, it was like, what does BIPOC mean to me? And as a storyteller, and my identity, attaching my identity to my storytelling, how does that coincide if I'm still like processing and developing that? I know, Isabella, you had like really great things. I remember talking about, as a multiracial woman, queer woman, like if you want to talk to us a bit about that, and we can go into like identity and what drives us to be storytellers.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm with y'all because I feel this need to express myself in ways that aren't conventional to most. And I was born in San Antonio, Texas. My mother, she was born in Seoul in South Korea. And my Lolo joined the U.S. Army from the Philippines. And so he met my grandma and they immigrated to a small town in Arizona. And then my mother then ended up going to the University of Texas, San Antonio. So I grew up in the South, and then I moved to Alberta in 2007, so just before Barack Obama got elected. So I didn't live in that era or live in America in the States, in the south of Turtle Island, and live that life. So I feel privileged from having a white stepfather to bring us to Canada and being able to immigrate here as an American, as a second generation immigrant to America, and then now being a first generation immigrant to Canada. But like how nobody knows about all of this when they look at me, and they don't see that pain of having to erase myself growing up in the South as a queer Asian woman with this white father. And it's driven me to playwriting because I don't know my own voice. And so finding my voice has been through art, has been through meeting other people who feel like reflections of myself. And I feel like sometimes I hide behind playwriting. And that's why I think dance is so amazing, and acting is so amazing, and performing is so amazing, because I feel like I don't have the confidence yet to do that. And so do y'all have something about that brings you closer to that edge of your identity needing you to speak, needing you to move and show yourself? Because I think that is terrifying to me. So did y'all want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. Oh.
Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. That was so beautiful, Isabella. And a lot of what you mentioned or talked about really did resonate about, yeah, needing to express, to kind of also investigate, but also share this part of you that is beyond words sometimes. And, you know, I think with dance and performing, you know, it's helped me to kind of reconcile with the fact that I don't have to have it all figured out, whether it's myself, whether it's like where I'm going, even with the performing arts. It's very much so, performing is very much so who you are in that moment, but also, you know, it transcends past and present and even future, because you're just, you know, for me, I'm embodying and connecting with so many different time periods, whether it's like an ancestral calling or who I'm trying to be. There's just this like temporal kind of space that I feel like I get into when I'm dancing. And, you know, it's comforting, but it's also very jarring to be in that place, because I find that I have a hard time watching myself, like whether it's videos of me dancing, because it's so, I think it's just so raw and real and personal. There's just something about it that is like that double looking back at like me in that place that's like, I can't do it. And I think that just speaks to just the like vitality of performance, whether it's you're watching it in the now or watching it back. Yeah.
I feel like I like, or I'm kind of like buzzing on the point that you mentioned about hiding behind our art. But I think I felt that way, and sometimes I feel that way, but in other times I feel like my art is the mode of communicating. It is the mode of expressing that. There are some things that are flattened when I just say them. And there's some things that I will never be able to just articulate in my relationships and in my conversations, you know, as a queer Arab. And I don't, you know, I tend to see this pattern amongst queer people. So what this identity, or rather this like experience of being this person that I am, what it's led me is there's like a disconnect between my family, who I love tremendously and have a really wonderful relationship, but they also know nothing about my life as an artist. And they know I do plays. They know I do plays. They know I wrote a play about a boy who lost his mom. They know I wrote a play about the Lebanese Civil War. And they don't know that the boy was gay. They don't know that in the Lebanese Civil War, 2 women are falling in love. So it's like this selective lying by omission that gets exhausting and painful. And yet I don't have the energy or the capacity to have those conversations. I don't. So I do so much in the rest of my life, and that's one site that I really just can't. I don't know how to enter it. And I have my brother who knows this, and he's the only one who's seen my work. And that to me feels like it makes every bit of all this artistic journey worthwhile. To know that he watched one of my plays one time. I got into the dressing room and I'm like getting undressed, and then I start crying and everyone looks at me and they're like, "What's wrong?" I was like, "I don't know, my brother was there." It was really emotional. And it was like that to me, because in an ideal world, we're out to our parents, they know everything, we have the best communication, blah, 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 blah. In reality, you take the good parts where you can get them. And that's it. Like, that's what, and hopefully what I do today and what I contribute and what all of us contribute today means that 20 years from now, the kids, that there isn't going to be this disconnect, you know. And we know that 20 years ago there were amazing people like Janet Sears and like Guillermo Verdecchia who we got to build what we build because they built what they built, you know. So it's a big ecology of us, and none of us are really alone in doing this. It's a huge ecology of us. So I think that disconnect between between my hiding behind my art and I don't want to view it as hiding behind my art. Rather, my art is the way that I can communicate. That's how I can let out the riot in my heart, you know. Oh, I hate that rhymed. That sounds so cheesy.
You're a poet, like embrace.
You're out here.
Yes.
You're like Dr. Seuss, now. Like I am honestly embrace it, and really I do it all the time. And I always tell myself, I'm like, oh my gosh, Eunice.
Yeah, like write that down quick.
Write that down.
Yes.
Do it.
Bars. Straight bars.
Big bar things. Okay. All right. So I actually really want to, I'm writing down notes, by the way, so I'm not ignoring you by looking down. I just like to pick points that you mentioned. And I think in overall what we're talking about, it's like, it's the vulnerability behind being seen and seeing others that comes into this, right? Because theater does this wonderful thing where it's like it's where we can communicate verbally and non-verbally, where like maybe we don't got the language right now to talk about what we're experiencing and how we want to tell our story, but our bodies probably know, you know. And so maybe you have to dance, or maybe you have to find a different type of medium. Maybe it's clown work, maybe it's shadow work, you know what I mean? So I find that it is then switching behind hiding behind your art, but also propelling yourself within it, and then being seen by those who are willing to see you, in it. I think that's the scariest part. It's isolating. It's really isolating when you're like, the inherited beliefs and expectations of those around me are not my own anymore. And then you're like, oh shoot, now I'm here defending. I feel like you're defending it, but then you're also like finding other places to capture it. My goodness, I'm really flowing here, and I'm like, where am I going with this?
Can I pick up on that? Can I pick up on what the idea of who's watching and who's not watching? I feel, and I don't know if this jives with all of you, I worry and I feel that often I have a white audience in mind, like a white gaze in mind. Like I don't know if I want an audience of 100 Arabs watching my work. You know what I mean? Like I don't know. I hope. I feel like I'm responding to whiteness and putting up something for white people to like become critical of themselves or to validate me or to whatever, like on some level, you know.
Yes.
I don't know how that resonates with people.
I feel like it's a self-soothing. I don't want to soothe you in your guilt that you are having as being an inherent oppressor. That is something that you have to unlearn yourself. And I feel like our sector of work puts us in vulnerable positions on the daily because it is a white dominated field. So it's like I get imposter syndrome to the max. It's like I don't belong here. And so this audience, it's exactly that. It's like, okay, so I'm gonna write like a fat queer story about this like Asian woman. Who's gonna watch that? Because they don't exist apparently. Fat Asian, you know, like they don't exist. And so it's like it's hard to be like, no, I exist, when it's like you're not seeing yourself. It's like this, maybe it goes into representation then.
Yeah, my goodness, we talked about that yesterday, and we talked about having audiences, having these colonial spaces to be performing your art, and what that does to the process of like just anti-colonizing everything, your language, the way you express yourself. Recently, I actually don't go by Eunice anymore. I go by my first name, a nickname of my first name, which is Kijo. And it's that a space in which everyone is not people of color, majority are not people of color, and me being like, now I have to be like, don't call me Eunice anymore. Call me this, because this is that I feel connected to that, to myself and my own identity. And then when you mentioned white audiences, that struck a chord to me, because I was like, you're right. You're absolutely right. Because when I ever picture my audiences, I don't picture my entire Kenyan family and Seychelles family. I don't picture my aunties and uncles who are extremely religious and if they ever found out about my sexuality, if they ever found out about me, like they would shame me. It's the idea that you do not want to be shamed, you know, or you don't want to have that conversation and that uncomfortable conversations. But then again, isn't that why we're doing this? Is to have sometimes to just unravel those uncomfortable conversations and be on the edge. Like it's like you're on the edge. We talked about being on the edge of like what you've already processed about yourself, and then working around that edge, and then being like, okay, am I willing to go further in and keep sharing more? And I think we're just continuously processing and just coming further in and further in with our art. So like, I don't know, like I think we're all trying to decolonize our minds continuously, and so don't even feel bad about it, but damn, I gotta snap to that, because now I'm like, wow, even this festival, I was like, wow, if this was not BIPOC, would we have really fought for BIPOC artists? Or would we have been okay with like the 100 submissions of white folks? You know? I mean, I would have fought for it, but like, would I really have fought for it as much now since we made it centered on it? So that's really, something I kind of like tackle and battle with myself too when I think about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, do you
It's
want to
not,
speak to that?
I'm just thinking like, it's never to, how do I say this? It's not to demonize white people. I know white supremacy is like the water we swim in, and they didn't choose being born white as much as I didn't choose being born Arab. You know what I mean? And so it's like, it's how to deconstruct it in my mind, where I don't only think of a white audience. I also know that an Arab audience presents all sorts of other barriers and triggers that are like, I faced a lot of homophobic harm from Arab communities, and so like then you've got the layer that another layer to come up against when you're considering how you want to share this art. I also know that there are a lot of queer Arabs, and then I also further know that there's a lot of queer racialized people that would jive from a story of a queer Arab, and so there's community amongst us even here right now. And if our plays land for one another, that does a lot of tremendous work.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Can we, Cindy, do you have anything to say, or no? Okay. So, well, I always like to check in because you can't tell if someone has like had this urge. Going from that point as well, I guess, can you like tell us how have you been developing your process as an artist? I mean, you're already explaining it now. It's through your own experiences and your identity. But what other ways have you been finding your own, I guess, specialization and niche in your artwork?
Yeah. Like your methodology.
Yeah.
That's kind of like specific to you that you had to learn, because it's hard to learn sometimes, because just like Eunice was saying, it's just like decolonizing this teaching that we've learned to find our own voice.
Yeah, for me, I found that like collaboration was at the heart of me finding my process and my creative process. Just because I know that I am not who I am without the people I've interacted with, and I feel like, as kind of what I mentioned before, being able to witness someone else's process and find what resonates, what doesn't resonate, where like what is brought up in someone else's process that I would like to implement in my own. And so I'm really adamant about just jumping into creative situations that are uncomfortable for me. Just, because I feel like the field of arts is just so, to put it simply, rich, because there's so many different, I guess, voices that are in the arts, but sometimes just don't get access or amplification. And so I think collaboration for me is just so exciting in that I get to see a bit of someone else and I guess carry that piece of me, whether it's like conscious or unconscious, with me as I go through my creative process.
And I think like with choreography, that is something that's so like beautiful, and dancing, because like you can have these movements and it's like words. It's like your body is saying these words that this other body, this other identity has lived through, has felt. And it's like this kind of like physiological passing of storytelling. But is that ever hard for you to, like, I don't know, have a group of people, these such different bodies, kind of take your words and kind of like move within them? How does that feel sometimes to see that back, like that reflection kind of?
Yeah, that is such an interesting question, because especially with choreography, communication, in my choreography classes, often the emphasis is like, okay, how are you going to communicate what you're looking for or what you're feeling onto another body? Because sometimes language is insufficient. Like, you want to say something and you see it on another body and you're like, that's not exactly what it is intrinsically. So what do they need to feel it, to embody it? And it's difficult. Yeah, like I said, language sometimes doesn't have all the answers, and so you have to kind of meet another body halfway and be like, okay, what do they need to access in their own, I guess, history, their own, being, that allows them to feel what I'm trying to share. And I think, again, it's just also realizing that the human body is just innately a porous structure. Even not only beyond people, but beyond, things in the environment. And just like, I think it's going back to what Makram said about like the ecology of us. It's so much more than just a body, but also like the other life forms and structures that make up our world.
Do you find that sometimes do you find a difference how your body moves in private spaces versus public spaces?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. Definitely. I mean, neither is good or bad, neither is better or worse. During the pandemic, I found this like weird realization that like, although I like dancing at home because it's more intimate and comfortable, I also find that I'm uncomfortable dancing at home because there are these, like, going back to people who don't necessarily know my art, who haven't engaged with my art in that way. And so I felt like dancing in my bedroom, I was like hiding myself from my family and like trying not to be too loud and trying to, and it's just like, it was comforting, but also like suffocating sometimes to be dancing at home. Whereas I love performing in public spaces because I love sharing with people and I love giving that part of myself. And so, it's a spectrum, I find, in terms of how that comfort or that uncomfortability level in dancing in private or public spaces, because I feel like art should be shared, in a lot of times. And that's why we do this, to tell stories and to share stories and to receive and to give. But I mean, the intimacy of dance is also super exciting for me. And so I'm trying to like, how do I dance in an intimate space safely, and so that I'm not like traumatizing, or like you said, draining myself, is something I'm still trying to figure out.
It's so interesting. We're going back to that hiding behind it, and sometimes you have to just break that threshold. You have to push through it and show yourself. But that's so scary. It's so terrifying because we don't know who's watching. We don't know who's resonating. But I think like that's the power in artistry of doing that. But I don't know. I've been afraid of my body, and I don't know, like, I couldn't ever. It just seems incredible to me to move and to show that, because words are, it's so simple to just say it out loud. But again, yeah, sometimes words aren't enough, and we aren't just like one thing. We're this whole thing, this big collective, this cohesive piece. And some people, I guess, like, it's like fighting against that erasure.
Definitely bringing people into your private world, as Makram mentioned, bringing your brother into your private world, letting your parents glimpse a little bit of you, like moving, passing by them. Those are just like the really beautiful, intimate moments, honestly. Just even my mom watching me do my monologue as I rehearsed it for my piece, and then her being like, oh wow, it's really interesting, you have this habit here, is that a choice? And being like, I haven't noticed that. And also just taking, I guess, direction from people outside of the world in which you're so in your artistry, and getting people outside of it too to look in is always very it's very vulnerable, but it's also really, really great insight as well. I guess traveling into that lane, can you tell us about, like, I guess, possibly one of the best advice you've received as an artist, or just as a being, as a person, from someone? You could take your time. You don't rush. Yeah.
I think when I wrote like maybe 4 years ago, 2016, I guess almost 5. I was doing the RBC mentorship program with Alberta's Playwriting Network, and Kim McCaw was my mentor. And like, my playwriting back then compared to now, the journey that I've been on has been radically different. Like, my first play was like the weirdest post-apocalyptic with a robot. Like, it was so bizarre, and it transformed into something way different, way more vulnerable, way more rigorous in its storytelling. Kim McCaw told me a really profound piece of advice that stuck with me about writing, or about, any theater creation, is it's this like gorgeous contradiction of these complementary forces, that you're entirely writing for yourself and you're entirely writing for the audience. Because if I'm only thinking of myself in the process, it might as well be a journal entry. And if I'm only thinking about the audience, then I'm not doing anything authentic. I'm just trying to get an applause. And so it straddles this line of both have to be true and both have to be false. And I think, to me, that I can do the excavating work necessary for creating a piece of theater, and it has to be earnest and authentically linked into some spiritual center, whatever that might mean to you. But at the same time, it has to be rigorously mindful of how it's communicated, that I'm asking a group of people of their time. I'm asking an hour and a half, whatever, of their time. I gotta be, why am I asking them to be there? Why are they there? How am I communicating with them? And what do I contribute? What am I contributing to the conversation that we're ultimately having in the grand scheme of what art is? And that piece of advice has really stuck with me. It's really stuck with me, and it's really allowed me to know, when I'm developing a piece, like, what phase am I in? Do I got to be mindful of the audience? Not right now. Like, right now, I'm really digging into this, and I need to figure it out. And I'm not sculpting it. I'm just slapping clay onto the wheel, and I just need to get as much clay as possible. But later, and it's never this linear, but tends to be later, you're like, if I'm asking for your time and your energy and your attention, I'm going to be accountable to that. I'm going to make sure it's landing as best as possible. So that kind of that you got to be totally writing it for yourself, or creating it for yourself, and you got to be totally creating it for the audience, and both can be true and both can be false. I feel that that's really shaped a lot of my thinking around theater creation. As one of many great advice pieces, because I've been very fortunate to have so many incredible people swim in and out and through my life, and every one of them, everyone has so many profound things to offer. We like, listen.
Yes. I guess I could share one. This one was really simple, but it hit home. Was that, think of every time you go on stage as a moment of sharing, that you're sharing something, that you're not trying to reach perfection, that whenever you are, especially like when you're being graded on something and you're like, I've been rehearsing for this for like 2 weeks every single day, and then now went up here and I fumbled my lines, or I forgot this certain gesture that I've been rehearsing with my I'm thinking of emblems. There we go. I'm thinking of an acting technique. I'm like, what is it? Emblems. And then it's like, but then my prof is just like, it's okay, y'all. You're sharing. You're sharing with everybody this work. So that's probably been the best advice I've received. That it's all about sharing. Yeah. Yeah, Cindy.
Yeah, I think going off what you mentioned a little bit, a really great piece of advice that's coming to my mind anyway is one that I quite recently received in March during, Main Stage Dance, which is a dance show in University of Calgary. And this was like in March, like right before, things spiraled a little bit, is that sometimes or a lot of the times the attempt is more exciting than the final product. This advice was given to me specifically. I was I didn't have to, I was asked to perform a headstand in this performance. And I have never done a headstand in my life. And the choreographer, Heather Ware, is like, you know what, just like seeing you attempt to balance is more exciting than seeing you reach the peak of the balance. And I was like, oh, okay. And so, I did it, and it was a lot of practice, but I remember like that headstand was one of the most vivid memories I have of that performance. We only ended up getting one performance in because the show had to close down. But then I saw a picture of myself doing the headstand, and my feet are like this much off the ground. And I was like, but it felt like this huge, big, grand thing. And I think it's just really beautiful in that this idea of the attempt and trying to balance is like, it's this continuous space between being right on and being right off. And that's really exciting and really like potent, that feeling. And so, yeah, I carry that with me so much, because what you mentioned is that, yeah, it isn't about the product. It's just about like getting to there and finding the balance point. So.
That reminds me, I didn't necessarily receive this advice, but I was listening to a podcast with Rick Rubin talking to Kendrick Lamar about his writing process for like rapping and telling his story, and how he incorporates meditation and mindfulness into his like everyday, because he said like we're so busy looking for the moment or in search of the moment that we forget that we're in the moment, that we're living inside of it. And that resonates with me. It's because like we're always searching for this like amazing feeling of like, finally I've told my story, or finally this is what I'm proud of. And then you see it and it's like, that was amazing, but what's next? Right? And it's like, how can we slow down a little bit and be like, oh, I'm so proud of myself for doing this. I'm so proud of myself for, I don't know, like just like writing this down. And so like, I guess like how do y'all find these moments of gratitude, whether it be in your practice or in other things like that you enjoy? Like, I don't know, like what is your another way in that finds some like peace within you that kind of halts that scary vulnerability sometimes?
I think you're like speaking to it, and it's literally trying to learn more and more and more every day to realize that this is the moment. Like, this is the moment. This conversation, that's all there is. That's it. And then whatever I'm working on in the next moment, that's the moment. And to celebrate that and to like recognize the accomplishment of that in itself, that is the task. Because I think as artists generally, but then amplified by the fact that you might be racialized or queer or disabled or deaf or whatever it might be that marginalizes you, there's this immense imposter syndrome. And like, I remember being 16, and I've always had an appetite for being a performer, a writer, whatever. But I told my parents, I was like, I'll never make it. There's nobody that looks like us in Hollywood, which like to me, the world was either like you're Hollywood or nothing. and there's no industry in between. But I definitely saw when I watched TV, when I engaged in whatever arts I did, we weren't in it. And so of course that amplifies my sense of like, I need to accomplish something. I need to get a nomination. I need to get a production. I need to get published. I need to get this. Well, over the past 5 years, I've gotten some things that my 19-year-old self would have been like, if I just got that, I would know I made it. And let me tell you, when I got those things, I didn't feel like I made it, or like now I'm a real artist. Like the feeling of being an artist, a real artist, is constantly reminding myself to come back to this presence, like you're saying, to come back to this moment where that's all there is. That like these past 2 weeks, I've been like furiously working on a new play and so obsessed with it and so excited about it and so excited about the writing. And that to me was like, this is the moment. This is what it feels like. Like, this is the celebration. This is the good shit. Because I don't know, can I swear? Is this a rated?
Yeah.
You're good.
This is the good shit. Like, that is, the more moments I link into that, the more I know I'm on the path. And I always think that if I have a foundational philosophy, like a mission statement or a purpose, if I'm purposeful in what I'm doing, then how it manifests, whether it's through education, whether it's through playwriting, whether I'm performing, whether through its panels and discussions, whether it's through a blog, whatever it is, however it manifests, that's secondary. That's secondary to that place of purposefulness. And so the past 5 years, probably the past 10 years, I've been working on really finding that, like really orienting my sense of purpose, which can be very hard when you find yourself displaced in so many communities. You don't find yourself in the Arab community, you don't find yourself in the queer community, you don't find yourself in the Canadian community. Like where, how do you orient your purpose? But I feel I put a lot of energy into that task, and I continually, I feel the more in line with purpose, the more present I am and the more meaningful and grateful this work feels. Yeah, it's never about those awards or you know, the accessory things that come with it.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Finger snapping because my mind went straight into the idea that we're not doing it to arrive at a destination.
Yeah.
Because that is not how we should look at our at this passion that we're doing. We should look at it that we're always emerging. They were always emerging from who we were yesterday, who we were last month, what our art form was, and that's the best part, is that we don't know what it's going to be like in the next 5 years or 10 years. I mean, we didn't know that this year was going to be this way, and yet here we are. You know what I mean? So I think that's what's really wonderful about, like, imposter syndrome does that too. It does this little added thing where it's just like, okay, well, I had all these plans that was supposed to happen for me, that was supposed to make me feel as validated as an artist, and now it's not here. What do I do next? And then I think in those moments, it's really important to just be still and take time to just breathe and then reflect and then take moments. I think this summer especially, I did that moment of searching what my intention is, what I'm making intentions with everything I do, because I never really did that. I just got in the role of like moving and doing, and then I lost the joy within that. And then it ended up making me feel drained. And I was like, well, then what the heck is this for if I feel like this, you know? But I guess going, retracking back to like, what does it mean to, what does emerging mean to you? And yeah, and where's your, I guess, dreams? Be big, be those ask for Hollywood, sure. Having your own web series, sure. But what does emerging mean to you, and how have you been emerging as an artist in that shape or form?
Yeah, that's a big question. I think emerging for me is just, really being attentive to my curiosity, or what engages my curiosity. And just, yeah, I think situating or really grounding myself in this sense of dislocation and displacement that I'm kind of picking up on in what Makram was just talking about, and recognizing that, like, even in these moments of stillness where I feel like I am not going anywhere, that I'm still becoming something, I'm still moving forward. And, you know, I mean, I find a lot of comfort in the word emerging artist, because it's like, I mean, to a sense, we're all emerging artists. We're never like at the peak necessarily, because I think it's always going up. That's what I'm thinking about anyway. And in terms of goals, I mean, I would love to be a choreographer, or like, I just love working with people. And even the word choreographer, though, it's like, I don't know necessarily how I feel about it, because I feel like collaboration is just so intrinsic in the creative process, that like, can I really call myself the choreographer? I think it's, if anything, I'm always a co-choreographer in all these processes that I'm in. And so this idea of codependency is coming up for me in thinking about the word emerging, because once again, like, I am a product of all the people I've met and all the processes I've been in, and you know, there's all these people and these forces and these things that are propelling me forward in my art and in my craft. And so, yeah, that's what, you know, emerging is never, it's just recognizing that I'm never really situated per se. Yeah, that I'm always being propelled onto bigger things outside of myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's emerging is such a weird word to me. It's like, what are you emerging into? It's just, it seems like, I kind of like the word multifaceted sometimes, artists, of like, I'm trying different things, I'm giving it a go. But I want to ask Makram, like, what made you drawn to Toronto? Like, why? I mean, of course, like, it's Toronto, but what does that mean when you put yourself in this bigger place? Like, you know, what does that do to your storytelling, your practice?
I think that I just on the point of emerging, I do find that a weird word. I also recognize, like, I guess emerging, the division is like emerging to established, and the established artists are what, like, maybe when I get paid $75,000 for a play, then I'll be like, I'm not emerging anymore. I'm not just working for scraps, right? Like, then that feels not emerging. But even that feels weird. Like, I think every dedicated artist knows that they're in process until they're done, until our lives are over. And so emerging seems like a line of politic. It's to police different ways of funding. It's to police whatever awards, understandings of how we categorize people in the theater industry, in capitalism. Otherwise, someone who's 21 can create a profound piece of art that someone who's 87 and has been making art their whole life might not necessarily do. So then, like, those emerging established categories feel like they're there as politic, you know. But to move to Toronto, honestly, because it's such a big fat gay life. It's like the bomb for being gay. It's like the holy place, the mecca of gay. And like, I used to feel ashamed to say that, but I don't at all. Like, the fact that in Toronto I could go into the supermarket and potentially meet my future love, that to me is fucking freedom. Like, that is what I want. And in Edmonton, I'm living in North Edmonton, I'm like scared to wear my pearls. Like, I don't want to, you know. Last 3 years, all my plays, all my productions. In Ontario, I'm watching a lot, I'm learning a lot, I'm getting involved in community. But we like live in this amazing time where we could be in many places at once, and we could talk and speak into many communities in real meaningful ways and have strong connections all over. It's not like the 90s where you're like mailing your script, you know, like we can be on Zoom, you know, on FaceTime, texting, everything. We're deeply interconnected.
And I think that's like, it's like a blessing and a curse, like this pandemic, of like being able to see the ability of how we can involve people from all around Turtle Island and talk about their experiences, because we exist. We exist here, and and I agree. Like it's hard in Edmonton being a queer person, and I just, that would be amazing to not have to pretend to be someone else in front of all of these people and kind of, you know, hide in the closet for
Totally.
you know, just for
Totally.
safety, and not having to explain that part of who I am. But it is this painful thing of like, can I stay here and do this work, or will it just, or will me thinking of my audience, will that completely feed into my work, like we were talking about earlier, you know, like
Right.
where I am, where I'm located, who is around me, who's watching this, that means something, you know, and how can we build a community, you know, that's important to see yourself. Yeah.
And the beauty about this like quite interconnected world is now movements that happen in Toronto, we pick them up. I mean, like given everything that's just happened with Black Lives Matter, movements that happen in one place can spread in much more like much more readily than in the past. And so we're all deeply interconnected, and the wisdom and the movements and the energies that are emanating from other places, we can all pick up on that. And there's a unified movement, you know, amongst like us as racialized people here today. We're in the similar conversations that are happening in Toronto, that are happening in Vancouver, that are happening in the States, you know. So there's something heartening in that.
Yes, I remember that's like the power of this.
And I feel like you're.
Oh yes, Cindy.
Oh, sorry. I think I'm a little delayed. You go ahead.
No, I'm. You can go ahead. I can say it after. Yeah.
Sorry. I was just gonna say, yeah, this idea of placemaking. I think it's really. I think everyone's picking up a really good point about how it can be accessed in so many different ways, like via like, you know, digital platforms and social media, but also, yeah, through the communities within the place you are in. And I think that idea of like, can I stay? Like, is it, I think it's going back to this idea of like energy. How much can you really give to a place? Because I know in different dance communities, there's this idea that you have to go to Vancouver, for example, to really make it there. And there's no place for me here. And it's like, okay, well, what does that mean for this place then that is constantly not being abandoned, but sort of being abandoned? And is there room for cultivation? Is there energy for cultivation? I think these are just questions that are coming up for me in hearing the discussion.
Her name's Robin Taylor. She's the head of Yeg the Come Up, which is an amazing African Caribbean youth nonprofit organization here that has been doing amazing work. And I always like to do a little shout out to them and their team. TC, I love you so much. And we've been talking about, we should just have a street. We should just have an art street, like a really good art street that people can come in, and it's just a diverse, and like it's another Strathcona, you know, it's another like, but it's not just ours, it's for everybody to be sharing this space together, to keep it alive here. And that's true. It's like, where do we, but then also I'm young, I just want to.
But you're all doing it. You two are like organizing this BIPOC like festival of fear, which is so great, which is so not about just being BIPOC. It's like this thematic, unique festival of fear that happens to center BIPOC voices. Like, you're doing that work. That is the work. That's amazing.
And it's been tough. It's like, because we're stuck in like this view or this mindset of like the capitalistic like view of how theater should be and like how you should market everything. It's like, why should we have to make it look good? Like, why should it have to be perfect? Because that's not what this life is about. It's not about perfection. This is the development of our craft. This is us trying. This is, you know, and we never get to see the trying. We never get to see the trying. So this is us trying, you know, and I guess like that's all of our work. We're just trying, trying it out, trying to see what feels good and what resonates with us. you know? I think that's beautiful.
Are we feeling like we could talk about how arts and politics come into play? Because I would really love to hear Malcolm's, like, I did see that you had an anti-racism workshop. I saw it on Facebook and I was like, oh, and then I missed it. I was like, oh. I was like, so talking about how, like, our question was, what is the difference between to you between a performative activist and an artist who's using their platform and art to share issues and to have difficult conversations?
A performative
like performative
activist?
activism is more like the
performative activist, not like performance is activism.
Yes.
Not that.
Not that.
Like someone who's just flashy with their activism.
Yeah, like what is genuine, what is authentic, what is just like showing face, or what is doing it because everybody, the wave, following the mob, you know?
I think that if it's cool to be an activist, I'm not going to complain about it. If someone's doing it to like be cool and it happens to be like minimizing the harm against queer people, it like is annoying. It feels sticky. And I hope that they show up when it's really not cool. But also it's in my favor for people to think activism is cool, is relevant and hip, because as much as I wish to change everybody's hearts and minds, we might not get to that. And so hopefully creating sorts of systemic change, legal change, policy change, and changing many hearts and minds, all of that will create a safer place to live in, a safer world to exist in as queer people, as whatever. Yeah, like performative activism is annoying and it can be dangerous if someone isn't gonna show up when it really counts. But it's also not my biggest worry. My biggest worry is like the Jason Kenney government, like taking out or proposing to take out residential schools from the educative system. My biggest worry is like the Kenney government getting rid of GSA safety protections for GSAs in public schools. Like there's a real deliberate resistance against our ways of being, our survivals, our wisdoms, our knowledge. There's a real deliberate, and like, let's not lose sight of that. So when we have someone who's flashy in their activism, because they feel good to get an applause, it's like, you're annoying, that's not what allyship should be, but also like, keep doing it, because if you end up changing policies in your workplace, then all the power to everyone, you know, to those of us marginalized, but to everyone. And I can understand how performative activism can be dangerous if it begets nothing, if nothing comes out of it. Like if it's just all flashy and, you know, we put a black square and we're like, we did it. No. Like people need to follow through. But otherwise it's like keeping my what's it called? Just keeping my priorities clear of like, what are we actually up against?
Yeah, because one thing I feel like I've really sometimes like struggled with is like, how do I know that these people are safe for me in their allyship? Because there's so many intersections of allyship of like, you know, okay, you can say one thing, but how can we like, I guess, facilitate these conversations like this in a safe manner without being like, you know, good job, you know? It's like, I feel like there's a sense of like it needs to be taken in a serious matter, and kind of like looking towards the community and asking not just theater makers for their input, you know? And I think that bleeds into like this anti-oppressive like theater framework, these workshops and these like classes like this that like show you ways that you can, you know, be knowledgeable and learn and unlearn. And I think, yeah, you're right. And I didn't even think about like performative activism, it's okay. Sometimes it hurts, but it's like, okay, we need to get these people into these places and teach them, or not teach them, but like hold that space to learn, maybe.
Yeah, and to like really like it's all right, and it's also like to recognize that it can be very dangerous. It can be very dangerous if, like, particularly say white artistic directors are making these statements and doing nothing about it, then performative activism becomes like lifting the pot and releasing some steam, but not turning off the heat that's boiling us, you know what I mean? And so it can be very dangerous, not to take away from that reality. And so hoping and advocating that people are decentering themselves, that it's not about you as a white person. This is not a moment for you to congratulate yourself, even though I know pragmatically that works. Like, people will, if they feel good, they'll do more of it. Pragmatically, I get that works. But I always advocate, like, just don't, it's not about you in this moment. It's like, decenter your voice, tilt your orientation of how you're entering this conversation. Like, truly what real systemic change, for example, with Indigenous communities in Canada might mean is not that we're like, ooh, our cabinet has 3 Indigenous people, or, oh, look at our prime minister shaking hands with an Indigenous person. Rather, it's when like a queer Indigenous matriarch is running for prime minister. That's what it really means, you know, or changing the whole system, which I mean is very radically thinking. But those are what change. That's what systemic change really means. And people sometimes with performative activism are not ready for that radical level of change. They're not. They want baby steps and accessories and ornaments that look like change. So it can be dangerous, not to take away from that.
I just also, like, I think it's even simple, just like the conversations to have, just to hold that space to have that conversation. Because throughout this summer, it's apparently now everyone notices I'm Black, and you know, you just get emails of theater, I'm not gonna name names, but theater directors and people being like, oh, hey fellow Black person I know, so we really want to acknowledge you, and we want to do something about it. And I'm like, wow, you've existed for 10 years, and this is when you finally notice that your entire council and your executive team is just people who look like you, and you never saw anything of it. You never thought anything of it. Which is why I'm like, be grateful for that instead of being like, where have you been? Because I could just focus on the where have you been, and then not realize, okay, well let me just take advantage of where are we now and what we want to do now that this is we're actually having these spaces for these conversations. So let me be in these rooms. Let me open these doors and be like, hello, I'm gonna have a seat at the table. Thank you. And I don't know, like, just to own up that, like, I think we all have a strong voice as artists. We all have a strong voice as young people. And I think sometimes we doubt that, and we doubt that we actually have something amazing to offer, that we don't require 30 years of an education in order to speak up about it. I think we can speak up about it whenever, because you do have that truth in yourself to do so. And I think that's kind of like going with imposter syndrome that we've kind of been talking about, is I think we have this is strong power dynamics that go along with I don't know, being a student, being a woman, being a Black woman. And I think sometimes you kind of let it like hinder your voice, and quieten and make it not take up much space, to take up less space. Or because you are looked as you take up a lot of space already naturally, then people are like, your ego is too big, or you're too confident. And it's those weird things like that you just kind of keep reminding yourself, this being that I'm becoming to be is not for the people who are watching, but it's for myself. And I guess that can just segue, if you have anything you want to say, but I want to segue into like developing your own voice as an artist, and as a person of color. But if you have anything else with what we just mentioned, please feel free to.
Yeah, I can jump in, kind of attempting to thread a line through those two points. I think you know, it's really nice to hear, I guess, these conversations on sustainability and safety, you know, sustainability of a movement and of these trends that, yeah, can have very positive effects. But I think, Isabella, what you mentioned about, can I feel safe in this person's activism, in their ability to show up and to make space for me, and to really actively consider what I have to say and my experiences in their show of support in whatever degree that may be. And I think, you know, this idea of, I mean, I know there have been cases where I have like kind of, I guess, diminished my own experiences or misconstrued them in an attempt to be like, okay, well, this person means well and they didn't mean bad and maybe I took it wrong and maybe this and that. But it's like, you have to also be true to what, I guess, someone's actions have done to you, even though there are good intentions. I mean, you know, who am I to know what their intentions are if they don't speak to it? But I think it's really important to recognize that, recognizing your own discomfort and kind of this idea of like decolonializing yourself, like being like, no, like this is not okay, and this is how I'm feeling and yeah, being true to, or I guess what I mean is not letting these tropes of who you are or sticking to these tropes be like, oh, to diminish your own thoughts and your own ideas and your own feelings. What was the second question?
The second question was just like, how are you, the word we use is, how are you nurturing your artist voice? Like, how are you, sustaining that as well? Yeah.
I read a lot of nonfiction. I like read way more nonfiction than fiction. That sustains my artist voice. It just like gets me riled. I grew up in a very political house. Like my dad loves to, like I grew up with Israel and Palestine on the dinner table every night. Like it's always been a conversation, politics. And so I read a lot of nonfiction. I love it. And then creatively, I'm able to just like synthesize the emotional reality of these nonfictions. So that's, I would say, a big part of my creativity. And I've been watching a lot of really good TV shows. Is that what we mean by what fuels our creativity? Is that what we're saying? Or are we like conversations with my mom or something? Okay, yeah. I've been watching a lot of good TV shows. Like Euphoria on Crave is fucking phenomenal. Holy shit. That's everything I want to be as a writer, actor, filmmaker. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Have you watched Insecure by Issa Rae?
Should I add it to my list?
Add Insecure. Have you watched Fleabag?
No. Okay.
Oh my goodness. Add that.
Yes. You are so generous with your, girl, thanks. You're so generous.
Giving out those suggestions.
Thank you.
I mean, no, I feel like you would just love them. If you love Euphoria, you would just love just like that kind of writing style. Yeah.
Euphoria and She-Ra, The Princesses of Power, those have been like my favorite shows all year. It's a cartoon. It's so good. So good. I can't recommend enough.
What about you, Cindy? Like, what have you been, media consuming, art consuming lately?
Oh, I mean, I'm trying to engage in like writing, I guess, in a non-academic sphere is something that I'm really trying to do, because I love to write creatively, but I feel like I've been doing a lot of essay writing, and it's like, that's been draining in of itself. So I'm like, how can I, write for me, or write for the fun of it, make writing fun again for me is what I'm trying to do to help nurture my creative process. But I also agree with Makram, like cinema and cinematography and film, it really is a game changer. I remember like being young and I wasn't able to like go to movie theaters often because of like money and just because of access and things like that. And so like I would wait for like these big movies to come on TV when they were so old and everyone has already seen them. I'd be like, oh my God, this is my premiere at home. And like just like movie watching and that experience of like this like preparatory, like pre and post kind of receiving of art, it's like so exciting because you build a little like, I think this idea of like ritual that you were speaking on like way earlier is just so like integral to like this idea of revival and rejuvenation. And so yeah.
Yeah, for me, I think I'm really into like stand-up comedy, like listening to comedy and like satirical, like the Patriot Act. I love like political humor, stuff like that. And then also like spoken word, like poetry. That's kind of like how I'm finding my way in lately. Like in the metaphors, in the little things, I guess, and trying to figure out, yeah, where I fit in to this big world of art, you know? Yeah, that's Eunice. What have you been doing for yourself lately to nurture your creative self?
Yeah, I've been collaging. I've been collaging a lot. Just like I honestly, I can actually show you. Hold on.
Yes.
I have this thing, okay, so like people hate me for it because they're like, you destroy books, but I do. I repurpose them. I don't destroy them. I repurpose them. But like there's this one. I recently just went to a bookstore and I got this like comic called Creepy, and it's so beautiful. Like look at the designs. Like so my heart is like soaring high because I'm like, I have so many ideas. So I collage. I watch a lot of surrealist movies. One of them is The Holy Mountains. It's by Alejandro Jodorowsky. He's a Chilean film director, and it's just so beautiful seeing it. Like just old films in the 70s were just so much fun. They just like had like these great shapes to them and colors, and I'm just like, I see TV shows doing that now. They're just like being so colorful, so fun, so funky. So I'm like, that's been inspiring me because I don't know, I'm a funky chick, you know. Yeah. Questions. You always get like so like into it, but yeah. Isabel, do you have a question?
No, I feel like we talked about so much today. Like I feel like super grateful to have had these conversations with you because it in a selfish way it feels like I have, like, y'all gave me some advice of not hiding behind, not thinking of it as like hiding, but as breaking through, as giving myself space for that. And I think that's exactly what Fear the Fest is, what like we really wanted, is to not hide behind our fears, but to be fearless and with our fears. You know?
Yeah.
So I'm grateful.
I think one thing from all of you, I just gotta say, like, you all radiate in your own way. And I think for everyone who's watching, don't feel scared to just stand out once in a while and be seen. Do it because you got something to offer. And yeah, offer it, share it. Just share it. And like
yes.
We want to see it. Isabel and I, we want to see it. So if you're watching, you didn't pretend, this is a shameless plug. Look at me. Marketing always. Just slip it in. But if you're watching and you're an artist, but you don't really think you are, honestly, you are. And
you are an artist. Everyone is an artist.
Everyone. Yes. We all are. So reach out to any of these people you see if you want to like hit them up, or even just to Isabella and I. And
check out their work. Yeah.
Yes. We'll be sharing their, is it okay if we can share your Instagram? Is that all right? Or you're more private and you don't want to? We'll be sharing their Instagram. Check out their bios to be a little bit more about them. And Fear the Festival is going to be going on a week long. Or if today is the last day, then thank you for being here with us. Because I forget dates. And
yeah, no. Is there anything else y'all wanted to add and say, you know, to those folks who feel like maybe they're just not heard? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think I really do echo your words in that just dive in, really. Like, it's, I think like preparation or needing to feel that you need to like prepare or that you have to be in some place before you can jump in. It's like, I mean, where you are is where you are, and you'll only be as ready as you think you are. And being ready, I feel like, is such a lofty goal. Like, are we ever really ready for anything that we are driving into? And so that's why I think like this idea of attempting, of trying, of like not trying to be somewhere before you get to another place is just so contradictory. And so in thinking of yourself as this fluid being that's always becoming, always growing, always being propelled, really find comfort in being, I guess, like unfinished or of being like half full or half empty, or you know what I mean, just making space for yourself as well.
Yeah, I so echo that, Cindy, and like I feel I'm constantly in the practice of getting out of my own way. And then recently a mentor of mine said, it's also okay to crash into yourself. And so like I really extend that to just be like, especially if you're starting out, just get out of your own way, but also like tumble and crash into yourself and go for it. Yeah. And thank you for this opportunity. It's like, it's been so great getting to know each of you and to do this. I'm excited to check out the festival.
Really, absolutely. We're super excited to air this and for you guys to check it out. It's amazing. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.